Welcome to the What One Thing podcast, where we ask successful people what made a difference in their lives and careers. I am so excited to welcome to the pod a pair of meeting professionals who are redefining event prof life as we know it, from producing events for presidents and first ladies to reimagining what it means to work in events as a woman and a mother. Justine Sterling, Converse, and April Zorsky built Brigade Events to do things differently. Known for high-profile, high-impact gatherings around the world, Brigade pairs creative excellence with a people-first ethos, offering flexibility, maternity leave, and a culture where women don't have to choose between ambition and family. Welcome.
Thanks, JT.
Thanks, JT.
We're going to have so much fun. This is such an important conversation. And first, I want to figure out how you got to here. So, Justine, tell me how you ended up in this career. You've served as assistant to the chief of staff of a president. Why events? Why entrepreneurship?
Sure, of course. Well, it's been a journey. I think for anyone, a career is a real journey. And I never knew I would go into events. I started off interning at the White House right out of college, an unpaid internship, and fell into a job when I really needed a salary. At the very end of the internship, there was an opening in the social office in the White House. And so I was hired on. That was my first job out of college. And I was one of 4 people who handled all of the events that took place on the White House grounds in the Bush administration. So I caught the bug, totally fell in love with events at a very, very high level, was ruined for life pretty much after working on high level events, and worked for the Bushes from then for the next 12 years. So in varying capacities, I moved with them to Dallas, was on their post-presidency transition team, worked in their private office for a couple of years, and then moved over to the George W. Bush Presidential Center as we were standing it up for them in the post-presidency. And that is where we developed our real event team for the Bushes in a bit of a startup way. It was post-White House where the expectations were the level of a White House event with a very small team and a much smaller budget, no Air Force One, a few things. So, and that is where I met April. So we met there, we're doing events for President Mrs. Bush and the Bush Center. And that is where we honed our skill. And I'll let April take hers from there as she gives her story. But we were doing these incredibly high pressure events. We were working, we're a tiny team building these from scratch. We were working all the time. And then I saw some of my friends start to have families, and I realized the industry is really challenging for people who want to be parents. So I stayed on and headed up the event team there, eventually kind of topped out my career there as far as I could go. And I had the idea to start Brigade Events. So we launched Brigade Events in 2019. April at the time had her own business. And so we came together and launched Brigade. And one of our big missions was, how can we do these big events that our ambition fuels us to do and have families?
And I have to ask, so do you have little ones, and how old are they now?
Yes, important part of my story. I do. So when I came to Dallas with the Bushes, I thought I would be there for 1 year and then I was going to go right back to the East Coast. Obviously, I stayed in Dallas. I met my husband there, and I've got 4 kids. So 2 olders who are 17 and 13, who were 3 and 7 when we got married. And then we have 2 littles who are 4 and 1.
Fun. I'm a Gigi. I have 2 little grandbabies, and my daughter's getting ready to have the 3rd. She will have 3 boys under 4 years old.
My goodness. She's got her work cut out for her.
And she's facing these same questions, like, how do I follow my So this is such an important topic, both personally and professionally. April, you started at Neiman Marcus Group. How did you find your way into first consulting and then leading this team? And what does Brigade Event mean? Tell us the story behind the naming.
Yes. So I'll quickly tell my journey and then we can tell you about the name because it is special. So I think like Justine, and I think in general, most people, events kind of find you. I have that theory that it takes a special person and somehow you're just like, if you're meant to be in events, you will get there one way or another. It just sucks you in somehow. So I started my career as well, not knowing I wanted to be events or with that in mind. I love fashion. I always have. I had gotten accepted into Neiman Marcus's retail program. So my idea out of college was that I wanted to be a buyer, and they have one of the best retail management programs. So I gotten into that. And then this was back in 2009, dating myself here, but there's a big financial crash and they said, "I'm sorry, we're not having this class, good luck, find something else to do." And there was one job with Neiman Marcus at their corporate office for a PR coordinator. And I thought, well, that's all there is. I gotta go for it. And so I took it really seriously. I planned a pretend event. I sent the hiring manager like the food, and I did like a whole lookbook of the event. And apparently I was like one of 1,000 women to apply, because then there are very few jobs out there, and I got hired. And so that was how I got in.
That is April Zorsky in a nutshell. That is how she does everything in her life, FYI.
Very random, but I found myself it was not glamorous. I had this picture in my mind that it would be this glamorous place. Events are not glamorous, as all of us that are in them know, but it was so much fun. And I just found myself like in love with the work that I was doing there. We were doing some amazing events in Dallas and for, really all of the country, dreaming up events for the Neiman Marcus group. And they are very creative there. My office, after I had worked my way up a little there, my office was the size of about of a closet, but it happened to be right next to the fashion director of Neiman Marcus at the time. And he would whirl in and say funny things like, "More is more and less is a bore, ladies," as we were working on events and stuff like that. So it was
well-positioned closet,
It really was. And I learned so much there. The Neiman Marcus Group's focus still is to this day, I think, but definitely at the time was, customer service oriented. And I learned so much about really wowing your client and, going to the extreme to do that in both what they did in, retail, but really in my job in events. And I was there for a while, but I really found myself wanting to have a little bit more meaning in my work. And so I didn't know what that looked like, but I found the George W. Bush Presidential Center was just opening at the time in Dallas. And I was really interested and passionate about their women's initiative there. And so that's kind of what led me to the Bush Center. And I found that my skills translated to their events team. And like Justine said, that's where we met. We were on a very small but mighty events team. And I feel like that was the most incredible experience of my professional career. Even, Brigade, we do so many things, but back then we were so young. We were given really challenging events to pull off for very high level individuals. And with this very small team of women, we figured out how to do it at a very young age. And so we'll never forget those days. Hopefully Justine and I can write a book about it or something someday, because there were a lot of fun things, and we have a lot of stories to tell from there that were amazing. But
love to read that. And will the book be called Brigade? What does Brigade? Yeah. What's the story there?
Yes. So I'll let Justine tell about that, because there was a lot of conversation about the name. So Justine, you should tell that.
Yes. Well, I will say, and just to add on to what April was saying, so much of what we learned in our careers and what we carried through at Brigade, we learned from President Mrs. Bush and the leadership at the Bush Center in terms of how you host people, how you make it feel high level, unlike any other. And I think that is where we learned to kind of push the status quo. Yes, it can be nicer than that. Yes, it can be. The food can be better than that. And, kind of like, how do we turn things over and, rethink them totally? And so that's kind of the approach we take. And we can talk more about the events. But like, for example, we go into venues, and a lot of times we do something at these venues that they've never done. And they always think we're a little crazy. And we're like, trust us, we can do this. And I think we learned that at a very young age of how to do that. But the name, so it's always been a group of women from the beginning. I think we don't know why, we were not opposed to hiring men, but we've always had women working at Brigade. But when we launched, so our industry, there are 1 million wedding planners in Dallas and beyond. But of course, we were launching in Dallas, and we always have been on the corporate side. Some of our people on our team have done weddings, but we've always been corporate. And our corporate events are massive, not in number, not like a 10,000 person corporate event. They're massive in complexity. So it's very rare intricacy. It's very rare for us to have one person lead an event because it's almost too much to handle, truly. And those are the ones we like. We want the big ones, complicated. So all that to say is this is a team, like a collaborative business. It's team planning. It's not necessarily like an individual planning. And as I was thinking about the name, mentors really pushed me to say, my maiden name was Sterling. So Sterling Events. And why don't you call this, name it your name? And I just was like, that is not who we are. I kept feeling like this is a team-based company. It's not about one person. And I truly think it came to me in the middle of the night. The name Brigade came up. We were very military influenced in the beginning of our careers where we did a lot of military events. I don't know why. And then also Beyonce's formation of like women came into my mind, and I don't know, Brigade just exploded, and that's how we came up with it. And I truly, like, the name came to me and I never faltered. And I had so many mentors, many men mentors who thought it was just a terrible name. I just said, sorry, that's the name.
I think it's lovely.
Obviously, brigade means, small army that can do great things like a militia. And at times we really feel that way. We go into an event with this small army of just incredible event planners and make big things happen. So it is fitting for what we do. So it's been the perfect name.
So inspire us. Give us an example of an event that was just over the top, the attention to detail, like you said, the complexity. How do you really take events to the next level?
Gosh, it's hard to think of one, JC, because like Justine said, really all the events we do has this approach.
Well, I would say the one that is always a good example of ours is it's a gathering of industry leaders, top CEOs, artists and celebrities, sports players, and, not that we can talk about a lot of what the event is or who it's hosted by or who attends, but it's very confidential. I think that is one other thing about our company is most of our events, we're under NDA, can't post on social, we can't list their name on social. So if you go to our Instagram, you'll see like, what do they do? That's why. But we can give you some examples of the intricacies. We would have to find a location with an FBO that can handle 65 private planes coming in to fly every attendee has their own private plane and their own security detail and their own, full kingdom that gets them there. So April, I think build upon that. Each speaker, they may be doing a content full of, there's a speaker with multiple world leaders from around the world coming. The next is, industry with all artists and, celebrities of people who you would know every single one of them, in the sports world. And if you think about that, a lot of events have one of those people speaking. So one world leader, or you go to an event with one sports person, Tom Brady speaking, and you listen to him speak. This is that times 30. Speakers at that level.
And really every attendee kind of on that same playing field as well. So I would say multiply it by 150 potentially as well for this specific event. Yeah, you outlined that perfectly, Justine, because it was, the attendees were probably one of our, greatest challenges in that, and how, as Justine's mentioned, how we translate our skill set to that many high level bowl, where we really give them white glove service from beginning to end and each individual, which required a very large team. I think we brought 20 people with us on site, separate from, the guests themselves taking care of their every need. I'm not going to name names, but one individual needed a specific type of candle in their room, and not one candle, but 8 of them, plus a yoga mat, plus very unique catering request, as everyone in our industry is probably used to, but this one really topped all that we had heard. So, and that was just, again, one individual. So it was a very interesting challenge with just our attendees and speakers, but the space itself was also a challenge because these attendees have seen everything. And so how do you impress a group like that? Mm-hmm. And that was our challenge from the beginning as well. Like, this needs to be something they've never seen, they've never experienced. And, here's a venue that's beautiful, but it's, at the end of the day, still a ballroom. So we worked, ferociously on creative plans that flipped throughout the day, exaggerating by saying 100 times, but it really felt like that. Probably flipped 6 or 7, but it nearly killed us. But every time they would walk back into the ballroom after maybe even a 45-minute break into another space or another session somewhere, the room looked and felt different and completely different. And so that was another really amazing thing about that event. And then, as Justine mentioned, pretty much each and every of these individuals had their own security details in some way or fashion. Some were current world leaders, so they, traveled with their country's detail. But for the most part, the request was that no security could come in. So really, it was just the high profile individual on their own, so that when this group was sitting together, they looked next to them and they were like peers, they sat together. So the security measure had to be extreme, which we partnered with a company. And this took place during UNGA week in New York, which, as you know, is, all of the UN General Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of world leaders are in town. And somebody said to us, this is higher security than they have at UNGA for our event. And they weren't kidding. It was insane. So,
and then one other example I will add to that. And again, we've used a lot of these pieces at various events, but this was one that had a lot of them. We were at an amazing hotel in New York, and very high end, where, most people would be very impressed with the culinary aspect, but it was young. It was a new hotel with young staff and young leadership. And the food was not quite at the level that we wanted. Again, this crowd is as discerning as they come, right? So if they're coming to an event, if they're taking time out of their schedule, which is running the world, they want to have their latte exactly as they wish and their omelet with exactly what they want. And, the food has to be next level. So we actually brought in our own banquet captain. So really we used their catering service, but we brought in a banquet captain with, 40 plus years of experience, and we retrained their catering team because the venue was the venue and it had been signed and contracted. And so we retrained their catering team so that they could operate at the level that we needed them to. And it was a huge addition to the event because they delivered. They really delivered, but they weren't ready when we first came in.
Wow. It sounds like your to-do list, like the logistics for one of these, are just off the charts. I want to hear what a typical day for you would be. So, April, are you still making, image boards for going to the grocery store? What's a typical day for you?
Well, I have 3 children. So I have ages from 11 down to 4. And so not quite like your daughter, JT, but still very busy. So my day starts very early. I'm usually, with the sun rising because of my kids and getting them off. Justine and I often say, we've lived a whole life before we get to the office. And any mom or parent can relate to that, I think. A lot goes into it, getting them ready, getting them fed, getting them off to school or wherever it is that they're going that day. And so then once we get into the office, I feel like I can kind of breathe a little bit.
We call it the spa often. Like the offices are, because it's quiet and no one's hanging on us.
Absolutely.
But all kidding aside, our days are usually pretty busy. Justine and I are always looking for ways to cut meetings because we are pretty meeting heavy, but we're very team oriented as we've talked about. So we're often, kicking off with a touch base with, kind of our business strategy side of our team, going over any, urgent business matters that we have. And then we're on a lot of client calls throughout the day with our team or with our clients. As hard as it is for us to have to pull out of the weeds of planning, we do that now because we have such an incredible team that's so good at the details. But we are still very much involved with all of our clients. So we are on calls a lot. And when we're not on the calls, I feel like we're meeting with our directors and our managers and just kind of looking over documents, talking about mood boards, all the things. And a big part of, Justine focus a lot of times is how the heck do we schedule this many events with this many people? And so we're often talking about that. We have events all over the world. And so that's been a real big challenge for us. How do we have 4 people in Italy and then have an event in Dallas the next day, and so it's a challenge.
How large is your team?
So we are 9 full-time. And those are all, except for one, all based in Dallas, Fort Worth area. And then we have a contractor base where we kind of ebb and flow using them. Very trusted, very senior contractor base. So these are, people who've had really big, high-powered jobs in the past and either have chosen not to, most of them left their jobs when they had kids and, because of this problem we're trying to solve, couldn't figure out a way in the industry to have kids and keep those jobs. And then we pulled them back in to contract with us. So we've got a really good contractor base of probably up to 20 people that we ebb and flow with. And we have a big team because, we have 4 big anchor corporate clients right now. And for most of those clients, we do 8 to 12 events for them a year.
That's a lot, and all over the globe.
All over the globe. And I will say, I think if we would have told ourselves starting in 2019, April, we would be doing this many international events, I don't think we would believe it. Our clients took us international, really. So we have very trusted clients who stuck with us through COVID. And then post-COVID, they really wanted to bust out of the normal domestic event and really kind of impress most of them are hosting events for their own clients or customers. And so they took us international. And so that's been a really good challenge for us, like a great new skill set.
Did you also learn to do virtual during the pandemic?
Unfortunately, we had to.
Ooh.
Yes, the pandemic was a very big challenge for us. I mean, I don't need to tell anyone in the event industry that because anyone who went through that experienced it. But our 2 big challenges that were unique to Brigade was we just launched in 2019. So we had a really big, amazing first year. We really expanded into New York pretty much immediately. Started out with Dallas business, expanded into New York in April, had a huge New York client base by the fall. We could just see the business exploding, really, and then came to a screeching halt. But I think the advantage we had was we had a big team and we had a couple of really amazing anchor clients. One of those was the Bush Center, who was our biggest supporter from the beginning. That is an important thing to say is when I started Brigade, I took part of the team from the Bush Center and we worked through the agreement with them. So we contracted back to do all of their events. And we would have never done it without their support. So they're a huge reason we made it through COVID. So we survived COVID. We took on a lot of other companies that shut down. We took on their business. We had to do the virtual piece. But another challenge unique to us is we had 5 pregnancies on our full-time team in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah,
including ourselves.
And at that time we had 6 full-time team members. So
5 of 6. 5 of 6 got pregnant, and we didn't have a maternity leave. And this kind of goes into our one thing, JT, and not to get there too early, but we always knew we wanted to build a business to support women. And at the time, I had my 2 stepsons and April had kids and, we were moms, but we hadn't had a maternity leave yet at Brigade. And we very quickly had to organize ourselves and put together a maternity leave that we were proud of. And we hadn't had to do that yet. And we had to do that during COVID. So,
how did you make that work? How did you run the business and yet have everyone on maternity leave?
Well, I will say when we first hit COVID, you can ask April or anyone on my team, I run a tight ship in terms of finances. I grew up in the entrepreneurship world. I grew up on a farm in Kansas. I am very money conscious. And so we went line by line and cut every penny we possibly could. And I think that's a big reason of why we made it through. We didn't have to lay anyone off, but we cut all the extra pennies. And then when we were working on our maternity leave, luckily they were staggered. Luckily they weren't all in the same month. But I just said, I did a lot of research on what was the right amount of time to give women. And I had not had a baby yet. So I was basing this off of, the people in my surroundings, my work, friends and colleagues, and then a lot of research. So I dug in on the numbers and discovered, the minimum in the US a lot is 12 weeks of maternity leave. And that is actually not enough time. Not that everyone will tell you that, I think, if you've been a mom, but it's actually not that much more. 16 weeks is a huge difference. The difference between 12 and 16 is just huge in terms of when you have a baby. At 12 weeks, you're just hitting a schedule. And at 16 weeks, you are like getting in a groove and feeling like yourself again. So what we decided to do is we gave 16 weeks of maternity leave, partially paid, not all paid, supplemented with short-term disability. And then we did a month of transition. So it was, it's a 20-week leave with the 50% month of transition. And so it's not all paid, but we chose to pay in time as much as we could, and then, pay partially with the money. And then we supplemented, and we all worked together to supplement it. I think it was very hard, but I think we said we're not going to do this halfway, even though it's COVID, even though we're small. This is our passion. We're going to figure it out.
I think that's the biggest question. Because of figuring it out, you've been named a best place for working parents. Why has this industry had such a tough time accommodating nurturing for men and for women? And is there a way to manage the travel needs of events, the long hours on site for yourself and for your teams? What's the solution?
Well, I'll say one thing and then April add in. But as you were talking about our normal day in our life, as April was talking about it, the other piece to note, that is exactly what our days look like, plus total flexibility. So, in the middle of that, I think April and I and many of our team members have the flexibility to pop over to my daughter's school and do her lunch picnic with her in between a client meeting and a business meeting. And, so I think total flexibility is a huge, huge piece.
Yeah.
April?
And I think we really tried to lead by example in that. And we have from the beginning, with taking the full maternity leave and not coming back early, taking the transition month, being there for our kids. And so no one feels like, oh, they say we can do this, but like I feel judgment or I feel nervous about doing it. And so I do think we have a culture where, everyone understands, oh, she's at her kid's school right now. We're going to have to move the meeting to a different time, or whatever it might be, because of this culture that we've created. And we're really proud of that. And I think the work we do, anyone in events, is very rigid. It's very detail oriented. And yeah, when we're in an event, we are all in, we're laser focused, but that doesn't mean you can't have grace leading up to it and after it. And I think that's also something we really try to encourage our team to do is, leading up to it, we try and provide a large enough team that, say somebody gets sick, we have a backup for them, or someone's child gets sick, we have a backup. They have a large enough support team behind them that it's not all weighing on you, and you can still focus on your family, leading up to the event. And then after, it's okay if you've worked till midnight to work from home the next day, or take the morning off so that you can take your kids to school since you didn't get to put them to bed last night, or whatever it is that makes you still feel like, okay, that was an intense day, but I can do both of these things because I love my family and I love what I do at work. I think we have both lived in the world where, you work till 1 a.m. and then you have to be back at your desk at 8 a.m. and you don't see your kids for 48 hours. And that feels pretty bad and depleting. And how can I keep up at this pace? And so we really try to prepare our team and encourage them to keep that flexibility and balance really forefront in every day.
Yes, that is a lot of how the industry operates. And I think it's come a long way. I mean, when we started our careers, that was 100% how it was. You work the event the night before, you're back in at 8 a.m. and you are shunned if you're not. Now, I think COVID helped that. I think a lot more people have some flexibility. But another key to ours is seasons. Peak season, most event industries have a peak and a non-peak season. And peak season, everybody knows it's going to be intense. You're going to be working. Your husband or partner needs to know that you're traveling more and it's going to be harder and you're going to have to get extra childcare. But then in off season, which for us, the summer is really down because in corporate events, most people don't do a ton of events in summer. So we have a work from anywhere July. We do come into the office. We also have a work from home policy. So we're only in office 2 to 3 days a week right now. But in July, everyone can go wherever they want and work from wherever they want all day. And we just have a lot more, people take time off in the off season. So I think there is a give and take if you look closely. But I feel like in the past, the industry has just been like, well, you're hired in events, so you work 70 hours a week, and that's just how it is.
And I think the idea is that if you feel good about your career, you're going to be a better parent. And if you feel good about your family, you're going to bring more positivity to your job, right? It's a win-win for both ways.
Right.
It is.
The other thing that we've discussed in the industry but find hard to actually do is we tend to celebrate the long hours and the marathon days, and that can be off-putting to the next generation thinking about getting into this career. How do we celebrate setting boundaries? How do we turn that around? What's the solution?
Well, I think we help each other. I think I will say, and I'm going to use an example, we have to hold each other to it because a lot of us, as event people, at the end of the day, we're control freaks, we're OCD, we are taskmasters. I mean, the people who work for our company are so insanely efficient and productive and on top of things that you do get laser focused. And we all care about our work so much, but we have to call each other on it. So, for instance, April's had to call me on it. Okay, I'm going to be for this client, I'm really focused on this client in this season for whatever reason. I'm going to be at every event they do this spring. And that may be, 15 events and their weeknights or weekends or travel. I will be at every single one. And April has to kind of pull back and say, okay, I hear you. I know you're focused. They are an important client. Do you have to be at every one? And so call each other and say, okay, so you want to have a presence at these events. Let's have someone else tag in for some of those. That doesn't have to be you, Justine. Or, someone on our team will say, this is an event of a lifetime. Let's say it's a Lake Como event. We had an amazing location there and a team member's child's birthday was during it. And, your ambition it really struggles because you're like, I want to do an event in Lake Como that's been on my list. Will I ever get to do it? My child has a birthday. And we have to kind of shake each other and be like, whoa. Child's birthday. Lake Como will come again. And honestly, it came again. We had another Lake Como event. So it was totally fun.
So an accountability buddy.
Yeah.
There you go. We all need an accountability buddy.
Yeah. It's hard for ambitious people. It's hard.
That team member, I will say, was me. So it's fun. Yeah. It's very hard to separate the ambition from, values a lot of times. And I do think the younger generation, they are really good at it. We have a lot of young women that work on our team, and I learned so much from them because I was never taught boundaries. So they really appreciate a mental health day. They really appreciate the flexibility. And so I think highlighting those things to the younger generation is important, and having that in your culture is necessary to keep them, engaged in events.
That's a good point.
That is true. They really teach us a lot about it. And we try not to say in my day, we worked a lot harder than this. Because by the way, in our day, people were quitting and it wasn't fun and we were burned out. So yeah, you're right. We do learn a lot from them.
Some of us old dogs may have a tough time, but we try. We get effort for trying. So I could talk to you about this all day, but we actually brought you here for your what one thing. We want to know the one thing that made the biggest difference in your life and career and how our community can apply that to their world. Let's start with you, Justine, and then go to April.
Well, it's probably pretty obvious based on our conversation, but our one thing is ambition with being a parent. You can have a company and do amazing things, not just the boring events or the easy events. You can do the big events, the amazing events, and be a parent, a present parent who doesn't miss the small things. And we have ways to apply it. We have a lot of examples. We just wrote an op-ed for Time magazine, and we didn't know if they would take it. They published it on our transition month. So for maternity leave policies, I don't know a lot of event companies that have full maternity leave policies. We've actually had other people come to us and say, can you walk us through your policy so we can, use it as an example to our employer, which we love. So, writing a maternity leave policy that's supportive with a transition month, allowing work from home, allowing flexibility in the off season or before and after events, like April said. It's very possible. And I will note, we've been profitable every year, except for 2020. So, it's not like we're making concessions for this flexibility. Like we're still making money, making a profit, growing our company, but we're growing it in a sustainable way that we can keep doing this and we can keep growing our people and allowing them to do this.
Love that. April?
Yeah, well, building off of it, it is a shared one thing for sure. And Justine has in her office a flag. We all have a flag with a saying on it, but the saying is tough as a mother. And it's quite cheeky, and Justine is so refined and professional. And then I love that sign. It's just so good. But I think we really do try to, and have since the day Brigade started, is look at motherhood as a strength and not a limitation. And, we just try and do that every day. And I really want my kids to follow their dreams and hopefully have seen us do that. And that, even if you're a mom, you can do that too. So yeah, I think it's the motherhood as a strength.
Tough as a mother. I love it.
Tough as a mother.
Thank you for being an example, for showing the way, and for sharing your inspiring story with the Meet Smart community. You are true leaders, and I hope you all have a brilliant day.
Thanks, JT.
Smart Meetings, What One Thing was produced by Bright Business Media. Visit smartmeetings.com to subscribe to your daily dose of inspiration.